Good morning. We're going to be in Hebrews, and no, that's not a coffee, 11. And if you don't know anything about Hebrews 11, it's the faith chapter. It's where you can see God working things out. And, you know, as I was praying about this morning and what it looks like and where do we go from here? You know, what God was showing me during that time is He is faithful. Now, let me tell you one of the problems me and Susan got into this last week. I'm not going to give you details and we're not going to go in depth, but you'll get the idea. A year ago, we had a decision to make. And me being me, I'm like, I think we need to wait on this decision. And did I pray about it? No. I mean, I kind of did. You know how you kind of pray? You're kind of like, well, Lord, show me. And then you make a decision to move forward. So let's fast forward to 2 weeks ago. Well, needless to say, my decision 2 weeks ago caught up with us. And it was on delaying and waiting so it would be better for us. And it really, in my mind, was really a great plan. I'm going to be honest with you. I had it all figured out. And I would pray, kind of. And so then we get the news, we got to make a move, and we got to do it quickly. So what do we do? Well, what's your thoughts? Well, my thoughts are this. And we made another great plan. It was the easiest, best plan ever. And then we had it all handled. Not a problem. And then that plan imploded this week. Not a little bit, but completely. And it put both of us in spin mode. Lord, how are we going to get through this? What are we going to do? How are what? And of course, then we're in trouble. So we're like, oh Lord, intervene now. And what God really kind of broke us during this week and just was like, how about you come to me? And so we're on a timetable, and we have to do, and it's going to take a while. But when it all imploded, it's like, let's wait on God. Lord, we surrender this to you. Show us how to work through this. Speak to us. And what ended up happening is Susan was like, why don't we call so-and-so? And I didn't really have it, so I just continued to pray, because I believe we should both be in agreement that God should speak to both of us, and we go together and go. And literally, a guy that I talk to twice a year calls me, and he works with the guy I need to call. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I get your point. So Friday I go through the whole thing, talk to him, and you know what he says? He looks at me and is like, oh, no problem. Yeah, we can do it. And I think sometimes faith is mistaken by answers. Faith, we say, well, God gave us this answer, so we're good. And never did I think that I wasn't listening to God or I was disobedient. But the truth being, I didn't really ask God. I didn't really give it to God. So when we start talking about the scriptures of faith, and I'm going to read through a bunch of them, and I know how I preach, so I'm not going to go depth in all of them, but I'm going to do 1 through 8, 11, 17, and then 22 to 24. We'll just see where God takes it. So Hebrews 11:1. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in the days of old earned a good reputation. By faith, we understand the entire universe was formed by God's command. And what now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought more acceptable offering to God than Cain. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man. And God showed his approval of the gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. And it's impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who are sincerely seeking him. It was by faith Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God who warned him about things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. It was by faith Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave and go to another land, would give him his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. I'm going to stop there, because if you read through, the faith was even in Sarah to have the ability to have a child. Faith when Abraham offered Isaac and God provided a ram. Faith of Joseph when he was about to die, and then the people of Israel would leave. Faith of Moses. That's the problem with faith. That's where I struggle, is I like control. I like to know where I'm going, how I'm getting there, and why I'm getting there. And you know what? Just what we've been through, God's like, no, I want you to call on me. I want you to come and pursue me. I want you to ask me, not during, but before. Because the problem is, I tend to wait till I'm bound up before I really go. Now, some days I'm really good about praying. Don't get me wrong. But there are certain things in my life that I can do really well, in my opinion. But God every time shows his faithfulness. When I take control, it goes off the edge of the cliff. What I don't realize is there's a bridge to walk across. And that's the thing is, I think it's faith shows a reality for what we hope for. It is the evidence of things that cannot be seen. I think a great example of that is me being here today. When Carol called me back in June of 2 years ago and said, hey, can you fill our pulpit? Sure. Had no idea we would be here for any more than 1 week. Had no plans to be here for any more than 1 week. I think sometimes we got to have a great plan instead of going to the throne, and that's why this prayer time is so critical, where we bring things to God and say, here, show us. Now, when you start talking about faith, though, you need to know what's opposite. Fear. You can't have fear and faith at the same time. Either you believe he can do it or you don't. I think it's James that said, a man that doubts is double-minded and unstable in all things. Now, here's the problem is, y'all been there and so have I, so have we. We pray for something and God doesn't answer it the way I want it. You know, the odd thing is, I usually hold that against God forever. Now, when he answers the prayer, I tend to forget about it. It's easier to forget about when he answers because, it wasn't as traumatic as when he didn't answer. And I can think of all the times that we've prayed, and the evidence of things we cannot see through their faith, we panic. We get concerned about what happened yesterday and when God didn't answer. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Most of them prayers I've got back there, some of them were life and death. Some of them was that I'd win the lottery. I mean, if you really think about the prayers we've said in the past and how they affect us today, that's the real question when it comes to faith. Are you looking forward or looking back? Are you trying to prove did he answer before? Or are you trying to look forward and look for the answer today? I preached a revival, and I'm big on asking God's questions. I've said this many times. The disciples asked some ignorant questions. I mean, completely stupid. You're walking with Christ and you're asking these questions. So my rule is, there are no dumb questions. Ask God all of them. And I literally preached that. And the next night, a guy preached the exact opposite, never to ask questions. Well, my thing is, if you ask God questions that he may not answer, why'd this happen? He may not answer it. But when I ask questions, I'm looking for God to answer. I'm trying to go, okay, Lord, was that you? Just like this last week, Susan come to me and said, I think you ought to call so-and-so. I know him. We have a relationship. But I was like, okay, Lord, I need you to confirm that in me. I think sometimes it's easier to take the pity party, take a poor me road, take the road that everything's against me, when really calling on the throne. This last 2 weeks, we've had some stuff going on that we have truly prayed for intervention. I mean, we have my sister's grandson, 3 weeks old, heart rate 290. They couldn't stop it. They life flighted him 3 times. I talked to my sister at 3 in the morning, and here was my prayer. Lord, I bring Leo to the throne of mercy and grace because I trust you with your answer. It doesn't mean it's the answer I want. It's not the answer I hope for. But you've always been faithful. So I think when we start talking about faith, where is your faith? Is your faith in the bank account? Susan's uncle, God rest his soul, he had a lot of money. And he was very wealthy. And he'd call and whine about how broke he was. Because his checking account's below $10,000. And that's fine. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get me. I'm good with babies crying. So he would call and whine about his account, how broke he was. He had less than $10,000 in his account. Now, in his other accounts, he had millions. And me and Susan are sitting there going, 10,000? Our account has $10. What's his problem? And I think sometimes that comfortability, and everybody has a different comfort level. Everybody has a different spot to where they go, if I have this, I'm good. If I have this, I'm good. But do you ask the question, if I have God and faith, am I good? Because a lot of times for me, I don't include that in the conversation. God's changing me and getting me better, but I think sometimes it's easier to see what's in front of us than the stuff that isn't seen. Enoch, he disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. And it's impossible to please God without faith. Anyone that comes to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. You know, and there's a whole mouthful in that conversation when you start looking at how much he trusted God, how much he pleased God with his faith. And the thing is, it's not about yesterday, what bad decisions you make. It's about tomorrow of what you include him in. Do you go to the throne with expectations? Before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. Man. You know, I think of David. Murderer, you name it, he did it. Adultery, the whole thing. And he was a man after God's own heart. Sometimes we want the end of the story to be today where it works out really well. But some of the stories we look back in our past and say we can never get there. Here's a statement I know is true, but God. When God intervenes, it changes the whole story. My question is, though, are you willing to let go of whatever is slowing your faith down in God? Whatever happened in the past. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've been in a season of praying. Just prayer is on me. That's why we started this praying in church. We're praying differently in our groups. But why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him, what is stopping my faith from being stronger? What needs to be healed in me so that I can draw closer to you? Because at the end of the day, I want you to be pleased with my faith. I think sometimes one of the problems is we don't really want the answer. Because if we get the answer, God may want to change something, and we're like, whoa, didn't mean change. And I think sometimes it's a lot harder to please God by faith because we want what we want. We know what's best, and we have a great idea. And I can tell you over the last 2 or 3 weeks, God has answered prayers right and left. Not necessarily the way we wanted them. I'm going to be honest with you. Some of the prayers we were praying, he bound us up because it was really a prayer we wanted, not a prayer he wanted. I think sometimes it's that human nature takes over. Anyone that comes to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. Are you sincerely seeking him? Or is he number 12 on the list? Maybe you only seek him on Sundays. I know I did that for decades. Or I only seek him when there's crisis. You know, it's for us, because I know our story. When business is great, and we got money, and it's going our way, it's really easy for us to go, I think we got this. God's blessed us so much, I don't really know that we need to go to him a lot, because he's doing so much. When things are good, our pattern is to not seek him. But we're learning that whether it's good or bad, we need to seek him. We need the conversation with him. We need to draw from him. And it's impossible to please God without faith. So, my prayer is, Lord, what's stopping my faith? What's between me and you? Now, here's a promise I'll make you. It's none of the answers you think it is. Because if it was that easy, then you need more logic, not more God. It will be something that you go, wow, Lord, how did I miss this? That's the thing is, when you earnestly seek him, he will answer. But do you want to? That's the question. The want to has to be there. I mean, think about it, Noah. Who's the next one? Okay, let's put this in modern day terms. The guy with the empty lot across the street starts building a boat because God told him that there's going to be a flood. Now, since you know the Bible story, it would make you inquisitive, but as he's building it and starting it, you'd be going, I don't know that he heard from God. You know, he was a little crazy before. Maybe he's mentally lost his mind. Again, when we start talking about the conviction and where you're going with Christ, it is tied to faith, and he will always ask you to do things that you don't want to do and doesn't make logical sense. And then by yourself, you can't do it, but with him, you can do anything. The problem that I've ran into is if it wasn't logical, then I normally wouldn't do it. And the problem with that thought process, and I've heard people say, well, it just makes sense. And the problem with that is, what that points to is you need more logic. You don't need more God. When God intervenes and you look back on your life and there's places he's intervened, that can happen tomorrow if you're willing to let him. But we can't be disappointed when we don't get the answer we want. Because when you look at the scripture, nowhere does God say, hey, doing a poll, want your opinion. What would be best for you? He doesn't. Satan's still alive. He will still kill, steal, and destroy. Sorry, had a brain stop there. Satan will do everything in his power to side rail you from getting closer to Christ. Here's a promise I can make you. If you're under attack or everything's going horribly, pray more. Not that God removes it, that God shows you what's really going on. What is he trying to grow in you? What does it look like moving forward? Because that's how you get free, is when you start relying on God and not your head. I think the world has taught us that everything must make sense. And here's what's true biblically. None of it makes sense. You go through the Bible stories, if you hadn't read the whole story and you read just the beginning, you're like, holy cow, what's going on? That doesn't make any sense, or it does make sense. I think of Jonah. God said, go to Nineveh. And he said, okay, and he went the opposite way. I mean, that sounds like me some days. And they wondered why he ended up in the belly of a fish. Again, I think sometimes the world says, let's make this easy, and here's the easiest way. And it makes so much sense that we're not going to pray about it. And that's when you start looking at all of these. It was by faith that Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and too old. So what happened there? They got a good plan. Sarah's too old. Here's a servant. This is what God must have meant. That sounds like me in my head a lot. This is what God must have meant, instead of just going back to the throne. And by the way, my sister's grandson, he's at home. He's fine. Sorry, I didn't finish that story. I apologize. I left you on a cliffhanger. 3 hospitals later, and that was a Saturday evening. I got the call a Sunday morning, and literally by Wednesday he was out, and they're like, yeah, he's going to have a few problems, but you guys can handle it. Again, the faithfulness of God. And that's what I told my sister. I said, I'm going to be real honest with you. I was praying there wasn't going to be a funeral. And now we're talking God intervened and he's going home. But God still would have been faithful if he wouldn't have made it. And that's a struggle. But it's true. When you start looking through where has God been faithful, you know, it was faith that Abraham offered Isaac. And I've preached on this. I don't know how you would take your son knowing he was going to be the sacrifice and get all of it done and built and have that much faith to go to the very end with one of my children. I don't know that type of faith. You know, I think of, well, I believe it was Abraham that was called to leave. What did he do? Got a better plan. That's what he did. Well, this don't make sense. I need to take this, this, and this as well, when that's not what God said. I guess my question for you today is, are you willing to risk letting God be in charge for a better future? Because that's really what faith is. Regardless what's happened in the past, regardless how we got there, tomorrow's a different day. Tomorrow's a day that we can rely on him differently, if you choose so. And that's the problem, is we have the choice. I can tell you we've failed a lot and we've won a lot. Every time we've won, God's been involved. But every time we do what I just told you we did, we got a plan, we took care of it, we waited, it always ends in misery, and then God's like, I wish you would have asked me a year ago. It would have been a lot easier. Because we could have went straight to the answer.